in answer to the typical question of, if I engage in therapeutic work, will my creative output decline? Your answer is it may shift?
Yes, definitely. It shifts. People find a new voice. I hear that so often, whether it's as an artist, as a singer, as an actor, as a musician, as a writer. I mean, the number of people who seem to finish the Hoffman process and then produce the book they've always wanted because the creative block has been relieved from them. The fact is, you always have choice, and what we provide is choice.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sheri Jacobson, and this is Therapy Lab, a podcast dedicated to therapy, thought, and the art of mental well-being. In this episode, we are joined by the co-founder and director of the Hoffman Institute, Serena Gordon, to talk about her life and work. Hello, Serena.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
How are you?
How am I?
How are you?
On a sort of 1 to 10, how am I?
1 to 10, or a descriptor, whatever you like.
Well, you've picked a good day, because today I would actually say, genuinely, I'm on a 10. And I know that sometimes people think, oh, maybe 8 is safer, or 9, because there must be something, wrong somewhere. But right now, right here, I've had a fantastic day so far, so I would actually own up and say, yes, I'm feeling a fabulous
Can you tell us
10.
about what made it fantastic so far?
Well, one of my passions that I don't know whether we'll talk about amongst other things, but a part of my wellness thing is dance. So I was very lucky with a friend today. We went actually to an early morning dance thing in the East End of London, where lots of people just gather, and lots of young people, all generations actually, and they just have really great music, and it's an opportunity to let go of all the stress of the week or anything, just completely allow your whole spirit and body and everything like that to just come together. And I just love that. It's my kind of thing, to just, whether it's putting music on in the kitchen at home and dancing around. I mean, my poor children grew up with me and saying, oh, let's put this on and let's dance. But, I keep going with that, yeah.
So dancing, and this morning, the element of community. Sounds very tribal.
I think it is, yeah. I think, and it makes your heart open and sing when you're, when people are all together. You can't help but have a smile on your face,
Yes.
And, it's very, everyone's accepted, and, you can stand there. There was one chap who seemed to be like he was in a suit, and he was just standing, like that. And then there are people who are really obviously used to dancing, maybe even professionally, and they know exactly how to just really enjoy themselves. And I just shut my eyes and just let it all out, really. And it's nice. And then, of course, I go, right, done that, now back to work.
Yes, very, very unusual to have happened in the morning as well.
Yeah, they're a wonderful team, because I also do 5 Rhythms, which is another form of dance. But this is a small company who've been getting together, and they're growing larger and larger, and in fact they're international now. And yeah, they have DJs, and it's just a nice opportunity, because most people, I think, might associate going to a nightclub with drinks or alcohol or anything like that. And this is everyone. There are little children there. There are just people just dancing because they want to celebrate life and let go of stress.
So Serena, tell us, what are you up to right now?
So right now, well, I mean, the job that I do is as managing director of this thing called the Hoffman Institute in the UK. And we're coming up pretty much to our 25th anniversary. Tim Lawrence and I started the Hoffman Process here back in 1995. We were quite naive, and I think the world in 1995 was quite a cynical place, and people weren't that interested or open to personal development or even to therapy. There was a sort of slight stigma about it, and if you said, oh well, I'm in therapy, people go right now, slightly kind of go, shall I move a little bit further down the sofa? But we had this wonderful program. As I say, it's personal development, it's not therapy. I'd say that it has therapeutic results. And as you know, we really complement the work that people do in therapy. It's almost essential that people do some therapy before coming. But it's grown and grown, and 24 years later, here I am. I've got lots of new ideas to bring to it because now, as I said, the world has changed, so we're far more accepting of our own mental health and well-being and preventative things rather than what should we do when we've hit a brick wall. We start coming back and going, okay, in order to avoid that, what can I do to actually look after myself? So we're developing workshops now for young people. I have a little tagline which is from cradle to grave. And for me, Hoffman is, we're an organisation that will support people throughout their life in life skills. So somehow I found myself as head and running this thing, and I'm still really passionate about it. I love it. I'm a female entrepreneur. I've brought up kids like you do, you have, and yet there's something that still really touches me every time I meet someone who's coming on our course.
How would you describe the course for those who don't know about it?
Right, so it is 7 days.
And I will chip in with my experience because I have been on it and I have lots of great things to say about it. But in terms of how you would describe the mechanisms objectively.
So, it's 7 days and it's residential. So right up front, it takes a certain type of commitment to come and do the process.
So people will stay over in accommodation, they will have their meals catered.
Yeah, absolutely. And also we look on it as a retreat. So, when we first started, there were no mobile phones or anything like that. There was very little email or Facebook or people being umbilically connected to their computers. Now we actually warn them in advance. This will be a digital detox. So, as they arrive through the door, obviously we have quite a thorough screening process before people come, in order to make sure that the right people are coming on the course, that they're going to get the best value out of it, that it's the right time for them to do it. So we're very much a sort of hub and a referral hub, that if we feel that someone might benefit from doing some therapy before, we'll refer them over to you and to other therapists to say, go and work one-to-one first, and then when you're ready, then come to us. So it's a bit like going on a journey. It's an adventure. You have to really prepare. You have to be in the right frame of mind. You have to clear the decks. People arrive with us, and then we work quite hard, from about 8:30 in the morning till about 8:30 at night. Our venues are always areas of beauty, so there's lots of going out in nature. The food is always really good. People get good sleep. Sometimes people who've maybe suffered from insomnia or have, bad sleep patterns actually come out going, I've just slept better than I've ever slept before. We're diving deeply into our core, our makeup, who are we? Why do I behave the way I do? What are my patterns that are blocking me from having a fulfilling life? So it's a bit like doing an MOT on yourself, mind, body, spirit, and emotionally.
So a little bit more about the Hoffman, and it is a franchise which you established here in the UK with Tim Lawrence.
Yeah.
And it's obviously the Hoffman International was founded by Bob Hoffman.
That's right.
Do you want to explain a little bit about his ethos and how you've continued and what aspects you carry over in the program?
Yeah. So you're right. So Bob Hoffman originated this program. It started off as an 8-day. Now it's become a 7-day. And this was over 50 years ago. And I was lucky enough to know Bob Hoffman. When Tim and I were living in San Francisco and Bob lived in Oakland, we spent a bit of time with him. We then came back to the UK and started the process. I hadn't done the Hoffman process, and at that point in my life, I hadn't really ventured down the therapy route or even personal development route. Even though I was a child of divorced parents, I went to boarding school when I was very young. I'd gone into a profession that was very much about hiding behind, masks and things like that.
You were an actress for 20 years.
I was an actress for 20 years, hiding behind a mask. I'd never actually thought about me. And then I became pregnant, and the real trigger for me for doing the Hoffman process, and I actually went to Canada to do it, was that I realized I was going to become a mother. And I thought, what kind of mother am I going to be? And what kind of parents are Tim and I going to be? And based on our own childhoods, we both realized that there were certain things that we would like to do differently. So Bob's program is really, first of all, looking at who are we now? If we right now were to press a pause button on our lives and go, right, this is me right now. How did I get here? How am I? Who am I? What is my vision of my future? What's my legacy going to be? Why am I on this earth breathing and taking up space? What's my purpose? And then we go, well, let's look back. How did I become who I am? So Bob's thing was to have like 4 stages of understanding who we are. First of all is the awareness of our childhood. Who were our major influences? What were our beliefs, our behaviors that we maybe inherited from our parents or primary carers as we were growing up, that maybe we had strategies or compromises or ways of navigating our way through life, the masks, for instance, in order to be accepted in the environment. So we look back at that and go, okay, how are those working for us now? We then move on to expression. So having established, that I behave like this, because if that doesn't serve me, then I want to actually be able to address it and let go of it. Otherwise, I'm carrying around baggage for years and years. And as you know, that's quite often what brings people into therapy, is that sense of, I know I've got this stuff, but I don't know what it is. So we look at the expressive stuff. So it's very physical, the Hoffman process. Really, it's like roll your sleeves up. We're engaging the intellect on a tiny percentage, but then we're really letting our bodies let it out. All those books and all that work that's about how the body holds on to and represses emotional stuff. The Hoffman process is a container to really let that out.
And that was very novel for me, because having been in therapy since 17 on a weekly basis, I never had the experience of group work, which was very unique and very powerful and moving at the Hoffman in my experience. But equally the physical activity, and it was very experiential, and I benefited from both immensely. What kinds of people would benefit, and how do they benefit in your view from attending the Hoffman process?
I think someone who has to, first of all, I think you have to know that there's something in your life that you'd like to improve. It doesn't mean that you have to have had a traumatic childhood or a bad childhood or anything like that. But there's just something, sometimes people say, I was just fed up of being fed up. Or I had everything, and yet I felt isolated and lonely and detached. Maybe people who have started to enter into addictive patterns of behavior. Maybe people who are suffering from grief. And they're like a little pressure cooker. It might be people in the corporate world where their HR or their line manager might have said, there's something about you, you're looking really stressed, or I notice how angry you get in meetings, and maybe you want to go and have a look at that. It may be young people on their way to university, leaving home for the first time. It may be people facing retirement, illness. We have 24 people on each course, and we run them twice a month. And, the age range and the cultural differences, it's non-religious, so it just is, I sit there sometimes in the room going, wow. But the unifying thing is the courage of someone to go, I don't want to go to my grave like this. I want to find out and get a little bit of more control or a little bit more understanding about who I am, so I can start to actually make a direction that I'd like to have. Yeah.
I think you're very right about the diversity. That was quite striking. People from all walks of life. And it really, it did unify everyone, knowing that we all suffer from emotional distress of one kind or another, and we have different ways of dealing with it, and being given different strategies, lifelong tools as well was very potent. Can you tell us a little bit about your, any challenges that you experienced growing up that you recall as early back as you can remember?
I think the big one is probably boarding school and divorce. Yeah. And I never thought of them as anything different. I mean, mind you, when I was growing up, I think my parents were about the only parents who were divorced. Now I think it's quite often the other way around. There are very few parents who maybe are together. Yeah. So my parents divorced when I was 5. They then both met other people and got married again about a year later. So I was an only child, so I grew up with 4 parents. Lots of presents at Christmas, of course. Lots of thank you letters I had to write with all the grandparents and everything. I think what happened is, though, I had that core sense of not quite belonging anywhere, having to be perfect for everybody. I then went to boarding school when I was 7. And again, that was a girls' school. Allegedly, I loved it. And I do actually look back on it and go, actually, I did love being at school. But I have to admit also, there were moments where I just really didn't really want to be there at all. And it was only as I delved back into my childhood that I started to realise that a lot of the strategies I've used in my adult life were created back then, of how to protect a little girl from being hurt. You know, so that was very much a sort of, if I keep being out there and being jolly and being the party girl and making sure that everyone's happy, then no one will notice that actually inside I was quite lonely, you know. So I learned on the Hoffman Process to parent that little girl, you know, and this is, I did the process 24 years ago. So I learned to parent her and just sort of bring her out of her little room and go, you're wonderful, you're marvelous, you're going to be great. We're in this together. And I'm so glad that I did, because otherwise I think I would have potentially still had been triggered by a lot of stuff that, you know, was unresolved.
And then how did you get into acting? Did you do anything before, or was acting your first career?
I think acting was probably my armour. You know, I think a lot of actors are very shy people. And I fundamentally was a very shy person. I got into it, I think, when I was very young through dance, being at a sort of typical little ballet school. But I was chunky and big, and everybody else was just perfect and blonde with their little hair back, and they could all do these wonderful things. And I was like, and then I just remember once doing a play, we were open air, and everyone was little rabbits, and they all looked gorgeous in their white little leotards and their little things. And I was the last one on, and I slipped over in the mud and fell and stood up, and I was covered in mud. And I remember looking out, and the audience there was a like that. And then the audience started laughing and clapping. And I looked and I thought, oh, okay, they're laughing and clapping at me. Okay, this is actually, I don't mind this. This is, yeah, okay, I feel quite comfortable here. So, but it was fun. I loved my career. I absolutely loved it. I was never ambitious. I was just someone who said, give it to me, I'll do it. You know, and I think that's always been my attitude towards work.
What are some of the parts that you remember playing? Any highlights for anyone who hasn't seen? There
are all sorts of, you know, I mean, obviously the one that everybody loves, I still get stopped. Like, be proud, Serena. If I was an American, I'd be going, yeah, I was in a Bond film. You know, yeah, you may have seen me on GoldenEye. I'm like, oh God, oh God. But yes, so I did do a Bond film. I was pregnant with my first son, so it was that long ago, in 1995. And so I was with Piers Brosnan in an Aston Martin. It's one of those little clips that they show kind of on a permanent loop in places like the Science Museum, allegedly. So that, even though it was just, 3 minutes of film, I think it's still the one that everyone identifies. The piece I'd be proudest of was a big 6-part series for the BBC called Aristocrats, where I played a woman who aged from like 16 to about 65 in the 1700s. And that for me was, at the end of it, I felt like Betty Davis, I was like, wow, that's my opus thing. And ironically, that was also the moment where I thought, I don't need to do this anymore. I loved it, but I felt that I could give more if I still have that creative side, and I still have that producing side and that organisational side. And I think that was the moment that I then really focused on Hoffman and really started to drive that.
And then during the course of your acting work, what difficulties, what challenges were foremost?
As an actor, or holding it together. I mean, I was employed quite often to cry on camera, and I played, grieving wives or politicians' wives who are adulterous or something like that. I used, I think, my sadness and my loneliness it was quite cathartic when I had to cry in plays or on camera, because I dredged up. And when I did the Hoffman Process, funnily enough, one thing I was worried about is if I heal that wound, will I still be able to act? Will I still be able to cry? And we have sometimes people who come on the process. We have a lot of actors, directors, creatives, musicians, and there is a little moment of, if I heal the wound that triggers my outbursts, will I still be as creative? And nearly all of them, Goldie is a wonderful example. He was, doing great work, but he had so much anger in him, and he did the process, and he healed so much around his relationship with his mum that he went into a whole new area of doing it, and he's looked after his health as a result, because a lot of actors and creative people, as you know, will look for therapy or something when they're just on a breaking point. And comedians and people where the difference between who I am in real life and who I am to the public is so stretched that it's like a piece of elastic, and eventually it's just going to ping, and they end up in rehabs and clinics and things like that, finding themselves. So I think one of the sweet things I love about Hoffman is we get people who come in, sometimes very well-known people, and without their makeup, without their entourage, they're sharing a bedroom. They're just another young kid looking for resilience, looking for self-love, looking to build up that sense of I'm okay, I can manage. And I think it really allows you to make choices about the kind of work that you take. And I've seen people's careers really change, and I see they've started to choose work that is far more meaningful rather than work that might be a bit more commercial.
Okay. So in answer to the typical question of, if I engage in therapeutic work, will my creative output decline? Your answer is it may shift?
Yes, definitely. It shifts. People find a new voice. I hear that so often, whether it's as an artist, as a singer, as an actor, as a musician, as a writer. I mean, the number of people who seem to finish the Hoffman Process and then produce the book they've always wanted, because the creative block has been relieved from them. The fact is, you always have choice, and what we provide is choice at the end. That's why the process will only work if people really commit. And as you know, with therapy, it only works when you really commit. It's a process, it's for the rest of your life. I can always go back to being the way I am, or the way I was, if I choose to. But I can also come back to the middle and go, isn't it better if I choose that kind of right path rather than going back to the left path? Yeah. That's all we do really, is give choice.
I wonder what your views are on psychotherapy.
I'm a great fan. I've dipped in and out of therapy. I currently have therapy. When my therapist is in the UK, I physically see her, which is lovely. But when she's away, she lives overseas, we just do it by WhatsApp or FaceTime. I quite often start sessions not knowing, having no agenda, not knowing quite what we're going to talk about. And what I love is that we always end up talking about, it's like something comes to the surface. And it might be a work issue for me that I'm challenged by. And we work it through. So actually my therapy with her feels quite often like life coaching.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she knows my past. She knows I've done a lot of work on my past. I'm always so impressed that she remembers so much about me. You know, she'll say, do you think that reminds you of your stepmother? And do you think you're actually in transference with this person? And I'm like, shit, how do you remember that? So, you know, I've got lots of friends I can talk to. I've got lots of lovely therapists I can talk to. I feel so lucky that I can actually look in my diary and go, oh great, next Thursday I've got a session with her. And I might, occasionally I'll make a couple of notes and think I do actually want to look at that because I want to unravel what's going on. But I also, she helps me affirm how well I'm doing, which is so nice. You know, think where you were 2 years ago, Serena, and how far you've come, which I think is lovely. Yeah.
And so for people who say that, you know, you may not need therapy because you're not in deep distress, and yet you use it in a preventative way, in a supportive way, how would you describe the benefits to you?
I think, personally, I think everyone should try it because I think being able to talk to someone who is neutral, non-judgmental, doesn't have a history with you, holds the confidentiality of what you're talking about, is a very rare situation, personally. And you know, sometimes I think people have come with a specific issue, and certainly when I first started, I remember I wanted to look at why I was going through a divorce. And I remember sitting down with a lovely therapist and saying, well, because I was a businesswoman, I said, well, I'd like 6 sessions, and at the end of those 6 sessions, I'd like to have, you know, unraveled the grief around letting go of a marriage. So could we do that? I'm thinking, wow, that was so kind of me trying to control the situation. And I think that therapist must have just laughed and gone, okay, sweetheart, you know, where should we begin? So I think everyone should try it.
How many therapists have you seen over the years?
3.
And how would you describe what makes the one work for you? Like, how do you know when it's a good fit?
Very good question. I had the first therapist I realized I was trying to please them. Again, please a pattern. I got a job and I remember thinking, how do I tell him that I can't make the next session because I've got a job? So I went into a whole vicious cycle of, I feel embarrassed, I feel ashamed, I mustn't let him down, and da-da-da-da-da. I felt that he would be displeased with me. It was great because it was all a process of behavior pattern, exactly. The second lady I had, I just didn't resonate with her. I don't know whether, again, there was some sort of transference there. I didn't feel,
and transference meaning the way that you respond to someone being reminiscent of how you related to someone earlier in your life. So it's a kind of a mirroring replay of that situation. How many sessions did you have, or how long did it take before you knew? So you knew, and into that session, how soon into it were you starting to think that she wouldn't be for you?
Like 10 minutes.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's really important that we always say to people when they're coming on the Hoffman Process, or if we say, go and do some therapy first, we'll recommend them to Harley therapy, as you know. We'll also try and think about what type of therapy they might benefit from. And then we'll always say to them, when you go talk to the therapist, a good therapist should really say, the first session, we may not charge you because we want to see how you get on. And I think I really admire those therapists. I admire them also when they're happy to say, I think our work here is done. you know, and to allow someone to go off and experience something and then maybe to come back.
So this is after, this is not after, presumably after the first session, but after
No.
a series of sessions.
The transference around that middle person was, unfortunately, the kind of way that therapy is portrayed in a lot of films and TV things. It was an American lady. She looked incredibly sort of perfect, and I immediately went into I'm never going to be anything like her. She's so marvelous. But she was American, and she had her head on one side, and there was a bit of, oh yeah, and I just thought, ugh. And that was my Englishness probably coming out. I thought, it's not. Maybe if I'd persisted, she would have broken through, because I was getting a reaction, which of course a lot of it is about what's going on. But my current therapist came completely left field. She was a friend of mine, we socialised, and suddenly I just said, I'd like to just see you. And she's just been the best person ever.
And how do you navigate that? Because that's unconventional, having a friend who becomes a therapist. How do you negotiate the friendship and
She's no longer a friend. She's no longer. Yeah. No, we don't socialise because she now lives overseas. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, that would be a question more for you, actually. How do you, as a therapist, do that? I mean, I know with Hoffman, we have strict guidelines around our facilitators. Yeah. And not creating friendships with people for a good 6 months after someone's process is complete, because again of transference. Yeah. It might be positive transference. They might just think, that person changed my life. I love that person so much. I can't be without them. But I mean, what would you do?
Well, it's very untypical, and usually a therapist wouldn't agree to see someone who they've had prior contact with. But I am hearing increasingly of relationships within the therapeutic setting that have taken these unconventional turns. So we know what the correct way is in terms of professional bodies, but yet it's very interesting to see that in practice different things are occurring.
Yeah.
And so, do you intend on continuing? Is it something that you feel could be an ongoing support for you? How will you know when it stops being such, or is it just continuous?
I'm really happy continuing because, as I said, it's moved more into kind of life coaching for me, and I think that that maybe also helps the boundary between her being somebody that I knew before. I have a job to do running an organisation, running a personal development company. I have lots of clients. I'm sort of out there, but I actually need somebody to help nurture me and look after me. It's if you have that beautiful car, you have to take it to the garage and make sure the 4 wheels are working properly and that it's been MOT'd and it's got petrol in it. That's how I look on my therapy. It's my MOT. It's an essential part of my being able to do the job that I do.
Let's talk more about self-care. What other tools do you have? So that's one thing. What other, and dancing, of course.
Yeah.
What other well-being habits work for you?
I mean, when you're doing the kind of job that I do, and I think maybe I'm a bit of a workaholic, so I'm always thinking about the work because I'm passionate about it. Walking in nature. Really, we're so blessed that we live very close to the South Downs. And Adam and I just love walking. We've got these weird poles now that we walk with, but I have to say it's wonderful because it also opens up your shoulders much more when you're walking with poles. So I love walking. I also love Netflix. I know sort of everyone's always like, oh, I do yoga and I just like Netflix. I like hanging around with my friends. I love my sons, and they're so grown up and things, but I love actually looking at stuff that they're doing on Instagram and sort of one of them's just started his own website of travel things, and that fills me with such pride. So I love the connection of friends and family, nature, dance. I like baths, actually. I just like sitting in a bath at the end of the day.
So you have a plentiful self-care toolkit. Do you have enough time to
Yes.
to fit those in? And when things get very packed, how do you manage to squeeze and prioritize self-care, or does it sometimes get squeezed out?
No, I have yoga on a Monday, which I always do, and the bath I can always do. The dance I can't always do, but if I do feel like there's a build up of energy, maybe something's happened and I'm not feeling comfortable about it, the way of expressing it would be to go off and find a 5 Rhythms class, or now this morning Gloryville. So I do understand the need to, as I say, to look after the machine that's driving down the road.
Exactly. You're a busy founder, you're a team leader, you're developing programs and initiatives within the group. You do have a lot on. How do you detect and monitor your stress levels? Is it something that you're consciously aware of the need to observe and keep track of, or does your body give you any clues?
I do a little morning check-in, so a bit like you started saying, how are you feeling today, or a little wellness rate of 1 to 10. A lovely tool we learnt on Hoffman is what we call a quadrinity check-in. Quadrinity being a sort of posh word for saying 4. And in our world, we're looking at intellectually, how do I feel this morning? What have I got coming up? What does my intellect need to support it? Emotionally, what do I feel this morning? My little child, does she want to go and dance? Is she feeling scared and shut down? What does she need? Physically, how am I feeling? My body actually at the moment feels great. I was checking out as I was dancing whether any aches and pains. It was like there weren't. I was like, wow, so my body's feeling good. And then spiritually, just, in here, how do I feel? How's my kind of instinct, my emotions, everything, how are they all working in harmony? And what's the message that I could take for myself today to help support me and sustain me? So I do that. And it's like, if anyone, even if people don't do the Hoffman process, if they could just do that little check-in in the morning, that is like checking the 4 tires are all pumped up and ready to go. So it's very, very important for me.
And great embodiment of self-care. For people who are interested in learning about the Hoffman, you've got informational evenings. How would they seek that out? We
have a lovely website, and it's nice. It does what it says on the tin. You can see where information evenings are. They're once a month here in London. We also have introduction days where you get a whole day of sort of dipping your toe in the kind of techniques that we'll be doing. And those are always really helpful for people who might otherwise be going, what is this thing, We have lovely phone-ins that people can attend if they can't get to London. And then I've got a lovely office full of people who've done the process who are really happy just to arrange to have a consultation call. It's very much, we're there to kind of walk alongside someone's journey. We're not there to say, this is what we do, now you need to do it. This is very much, as you might have experienced, that sense of, this is a relationship. And we're going to go as far as we can go. And if you suddenly go, actually, do you know what, I'm not ready, we're going to go, that's fine. Come back when you are. Meet you where you are.
Now you've got a diary and an app. Are those intended for people who've completed the Hoffman, or is it available for those who haven't?
Do you know, funny enough, and I'm so proud of those 2 things, because they were a little bit my creative side going, oh, come on, let's do it. And actually they've been great. I mean, the app is, we have sales of people who get the Hoffman app who haven't done the process, but it's so nice and interactive, and you can listen to some of our meditations. There's a little tool in it where you can, spin a wheel and get a kind of a little guide, a tip of what you might want to do that day as a well-being tip. There's even a little baseball bat icon in it. So if you held your phone really carefully and you were feeling angry, you could put it on, I'm feeling really angry, and then you can bash it.
Away.
You imagine seeing people on the tube, in the morning going, I love it because it's fun, it's interactive. So yes, that seems to, I would say it is fine for people who haven't done the process to look at it. It's better if you have, but I don't want to exclude anyone from, dipping their toe in.
Brilliant, providing a big range for them to choose from. Where can they access? Presumably the App Store. And it's called...
so it's called the Hoffman App, and also on our website, which is hoffmaninstitute.co.uk. You can see there's a little icon at the bottom that says "Buy the app." So it's Android and Apple, is it? Or
yes,
iTunes, isn't it?
The double A's.
Yeah.
Well, I got immense benefit from it, and I would really encourage anyone who is feeling a little lacking or wants to do some more exploration into their inner worlds to use that as a starting point. I think it was a phenomenal experience. And thank you very much for explaining what it's about, as well as a really insightful look into your own very engaging career and how you've landed from doing 20 years of acting to running such a successful program is very impressive. And thank you very much for sharing so transparently about what you do to keep yourself well as well.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, if it's sort of, we're all human beings trying to do our best, as I said at the beginning, on this planet. And I just think by talking about it and sharing it, then we can just normalize that it's okay. So,
brilliant way to end, talking about it and sharing.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for coming, Serena.
Great. Thanks, Sheri.
HarleyTherapy.com is here to help you book counselling with qualified professional therapists online or in person at the times and prices that suit you wherever you are worldwide. If this is your first listen to Therapy Lab, do hit subscribe to keep up to date with new episodes. We'll see you next time.